Welcome viewers and listeners to yet another episode of the Right Now Show. This is the 8th episode. The previous episode was on finding your creative voice with Prakrit Kamra. If you haven't watched that, please check out the link here. For the shorter versions of the videos, go to Abhinandan's channel and check out the bite-sized videos. If not, if you only prefer the listening versions, then you can go to Google Podcast or Prime Music, and check out our podcast there. On that note, we have a very special guest today who was actually our high school classmate, one of the bright students back in the days. Bright not just in terms of academics, but in terms of culturals and public speaking, etc. Back in the days, he was the guy who was working for this department in school called creative department. They're named only creative. They used to make some amazing documentaries, videos, etc. So without any further ado, I give it on to Abhinandan to give a proper, full-fledged introduction.
Yes, this is my honor today to welcome our dear friend. A doctor by education, Dr. Saishreyas has had one of the most exciting and admirable career paths. With the aim of creating an impact in the field of health, he's worked at multiple health tech organizations in the field of public health and strategy. Realizing the key role technology plays in healthcare, he co-founded a company, MedWiz, that is a bilingual education platform to help healthcare professionals share use cases securely using the WeChat ecosystem. With the aim to change the future of healthcare, he currently is in a crucial role as the head of product clinical affairs at AMILI at Singapore, which is South Asia's first and only precision gut microbiome company focused on innovation in therapy and advancing science. Apart from his professional achievements, Dr. Saishreyas is a very dear friend of ours from our childhood, an excellent orator, an actor, and a person with the drive to create a future for affordable and world-class healthcare for all through technology. Without further ado, let's all welcome Dr. Saishreyas onto the stage, please.
Thank you, Abhi. Thank you, Abhinandan. Thank you, Abhinav. It's a pleasure to be here with both of you. And I've been following your podcast for a while now, and I must say that I've learned quite a bit. It's truly a privilege to have been invited to speak with you guys. I think you guys are very cool. Back in the day and now, the coolness has still remained and maybe even increased a little exponentially. So thank you guys for having me. And it's very nice to see the throwback to creative department was a sweet touch. It's been a very long time since I thought about creative, but it's nice to remember that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you guys were the ones who used to I didn't have a clue about how videos are made, how videos are edited. You guys used to use Premiere Pro back in the day, 2008 and all.
Back in the day, Premiere Pro. Yeah.
I was wow.
The truth is our predecessors used Windows Movie Maker, and I felt like that was a bit too basic for us. so we had to switch to something a bit more professional. So we got a pirated, cracked version of Premiere Pro because there was no way in hell the department was going to buy Premiere Pro. It used to be very, very expensive back then. So I used to look for the torrent that could, shouldn't incriminate myself, but yeah, we used to download it.
I think that's okay because even to this day, I know some organizations that are pretty large, like big startups who don't have a license and they're still going for cracks. So
no, actually, I should say that I've paid Premiere Pro. I've paid Adobe enough money in the last 2 years to make up for the sins of my past. So yeah,
I think we are in the same boat now, Nandan and I, that we are paying for our sins.
Yeah, but Saishreyas, I think one thing that I mentioned in our introduction is that you've had one of the most exciting and admirable career paths. A follow-up question to that is, how did it all start? I mean, you were with us, you were studying science and we were in the commerce field, right? From there, going on to medicine and this whole journey, how did it all start? What was the whole journey like?
Okay. So I don't know whether I'd call it admirable or exciting. Actually, I would call it exciting. I wouldn't call it admirable yet. But I think it all started during medical school, right? I think to a certain extent, I knew that I wanted to study medicine, but I wasn't sure I wanted to practice medicine in the hospital. So I think that was something I had realized very early on. And I was afraid to tell anyone this because there is such a stigma associated with someone who studied medicine and then doesn't go on to practice as a clinician. So I think that was something that stopped me from, expressing myself. And in fact, I had graduated in 2019 and I was on track to, going and finding a hospital to work in. But then I told myself, you know what, I'm going to give myself 3 months to figure something out that is not necessarily within the hospital or a clinical setting. And I gave myself 3 months because that was acceptable, beyond which I think my parents and my family around me would be very pissed off with me if I was not moving in that general direction. So I told myself, okay, 3 months is a very valid time period. I've studied for 6 years. I can get a 3-month break, right? But I didn't take the break. I was very quickly looking for a job or looking for an opportunity. And this was right off the heels of something that I had started in college called MedWise, which is a bilingual platform on WeChat. It's basically for students to learn about patients directly from doctors. So I think that was easier, where you could share more cases en masse. So I had that sort of inclination that technology is going to be a very important part in everyone's lives, and more so in a doctor and a patient's life. And I was seeking out which part of this intersection should I focus on. And it's very similar to someone who finishes medicine and doesn't know what department or what specialty they want to, what they want to further their studies in. So I took the 3 months and I gave myself like an end date, and I told myself it was some Friday 13th or something like that. And I had my last meeting, which was scheduled with my current boss, who is also a professor at the National University of Singapore. So when I met him in the morning, he offered me 3 jobs and told me you have to do any 2. And I was like, wait, what? So he said, yeah, you'll be moonlighting in one place, learning more skills, and then you'll be doing the actual work for another job, which will pay you. And I was quite surprised. I was like, okay, it's a very interesting mix. So the first job that I had was at a consulting firm called Oliver Wyman. It was very interesting because we did do a lot of work on public health innovation and strategy. And me being the only medically trained person, apart from my boss, who was also a medically trained doctor, a lot of the questions were fielded to me. So it felt nice for a while. People were testing my medical knowledge, and I finally felt like I was of use. And then as the days went by, I learned certain disciplines that consulting has. Consulting is a very nice way of making a framework out of everything. So I think that anyone who is unsure of their career path should aim to at least do 1 or 2 years of consulting in a very junior role, because it teaches you a lot of these life skills or other business skills that are very, very useful throughout your career, of breaking down a problem into solvable chunks and then stringing it together. So it's pretty much Lego for business, right? Learning how to create a Lego out of business and then building on to that and then finding a solution and finding multiple solutions for the same problem so that it's cost effective for the client, and it is something that you can be proud of, that if it goes into execution, it will work.
And I think consultancy as such is like you're directly accountable to the client, right? So
yeah,
I mean, like, you don't have a choice but to perform.
Correct. Yeah, and you have to make sure that you enable the client to perform. Yeah. It's not about giving a nice PowerPoint slide deck and say, yep, here's the solution, follow it. You got to actually nail down who in the organization does what the workflows are for it to happen. Literally hand-holding. So that level of detail and that level of and how quickly, and I was working with MBAs who were younger than me, and I was being managed by them, right? So it was very interesting. It's in medicine, you're so used to the age-related hierarchy that, someone senior to me has to be older than me. But here I was listening to someone 2 years, 3 years younger than me telling me, yeah, Shreyas, you got to do this. And first of all, it's Dr. Shreyas. But then it was a very humbling experience, right? Like you break down your ego. Just because you're really good at one field does not mean that you should be given the same importance in every other field, right? So it's earned. You have to put in the work. You have to do the groundwork. Sometimes it's as simple as data collection, right? Of course, now I speak with knowing that I have a support system within work to do all the data collection that I need done, and it'll be done like magic. But I don't forget how I grew from that level of, I've studied medicine and I'm supposed to be like in the hospital, and I'm sitting down here with a Excel sheet trying to figure out how to make this how to pivot the data and how to, figure out a formula that helps me connect some of this. But it was very good groundwork. I think the 3 months was like intense tuition, to understanding how to solve a problem and using it as a framework for everything else you do. So I spent 4 months actually at this place, and then I didn't renew my contract. I very quickly jumped onto the startup role that was offered to me, as the second job. So boss wanted me to get a little in line with working at a startup. You need some discipline. It's not about just having a great idea. It's about execution and what are all the different steps in that execution. And at work, we're doing things that no one else has done, right? Pioneers in a field. And so no one has the monopoly of knowledge. What you have is on one side, more experienced people whom you can bank on for, if I do this, what happens? And then you have specific slivers of expertise that other people have that you can lean on to get information that you need or run a plan against. So it was, I would call it a metamorphosis, honestly, because I was like a little worm that was, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And starting a career in this place sort of gave me a worldview of, and a nice mixture, I would add, because I have colleagues who are purely academic. They do the work in the lab, they collect the data, and then they analyze it. Then I have colleagues who are very commercial and think about everything in terms of profitability or, does that make financial sense for us? And then I have, people who are trained in public health. So it's a very nice mixture. And I think this is something that all of you can relate with as well, right? Both of you can relate with, is that we've never done anything for profit in our lives. We've always thought about how do you add that social, economic upliftment of people around you in your work? How do you do that? And if that's not there, it's like eating food without salt. Like that element, that very important element is missing. And I have to say that I'm very blessed that, at work we have people who are constantly thinking about these things. And we are also sort of having to train people below us. Like, we have interns or new staff who join us. And the duty is on us to pass that culture on to them. So that is something very important that you realize in your career. And the earlier you do it, the earlier you see the value and importance of it, I think it just changes your outlook of how you do things.
Yeah. I think, Shreyas, you were speaking about when you're pioneers in any field, right? You've co-founded a company, right? And then the company currently that you're working with, which will come to in a while, right? All of those were pioneers in some space or the other, right? And then how do you rate the skills? Because when you're pioneers in certain space, you need to kind of have that visionary, the skill, right? You need to kind of look into the future and then say that, look, will this product be good, right? And it's all about selling the product and then, trying to understand if this product is really going to help people and really going to kind of achieve the vision that you had, right? So what are your thoughts on this whole visionary look or visionary feel, that skill? I don't call it skill, maybe a gift, right? That you have, and how can you hone that?
Okay, so I'm going to answer from my own perspective. I am no visionary. I was a simple guy who had a pain point, and I thought, what? If I have this pain point, there are thousands of other medical students who have the same pain point. And I just simply got to figuring out which is the best way to solve this pain point. I had a little bit of knowledge on tech. I knew I don't know how to code an app. I know how apps work. And at that point in time, I was trying to harness whatever new things were available. So WeChat, on the platform on which we created this, had a new feature called a mini program, which is under 4 megabytes of code, you can actually create a mini version of an app with the same functionalities of an app, and all of your files that are in the app are hosted on the cloud. So it was a very good system, and there were a few things that enabled this. I think fast internet connection for everyone via mobile. So 4G was very prevalent back then, and so people were very comfortable not having to download something. I just scan a QR code and then the app comes up, and then it stays in my in my phone as a thing that I regularly use. Now, I would say that something like vision is a very hard to capture concept. Either you have it or you don't, right? And if you don't, you develop it. The only way you develop it is by thinking about it constantly and obsessing over it. So you need to obsessively be thinking about what's next. Everyone who is smart enough can tell you what's next, one step ahead. The true visionaries look at 10 steps ahead. They've already thought about all the combinations at step 1, step 2, step 3, and I'm no visionary. I'm blessed that I work with visionaries. So I get to see that mental calculation. When you tell someone something interesting and it blows their mind, or like when you're able to see someone beautiful mind something where they've just, I can see it happening in their head. They're just drawing things in their head, two different hands and figuring it out, and they're telling you, oh yeah, this won't work. But you know that they've done the work to get there in their mind in one quick calculation. That's a developable skill. It's not, some people are probably born with it, but most of their lives they hone and develop that skill. So I think it's a learnable skill. I think that everything that we see displayed in any tech guru or someone who has done a lot of things in life, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, yes, I think they're blessed with some of these skills, talents that they're born with, but I think they've put in a lot of hard work to sharpen it. I think that's very important, is knowing that it can be done and figuring out a plan for getting it done, right? All of these skills are developable. They're not something you need to be born with. Yeah. That would be my take. So from a startup perspective, it starts with a very simple skeletal framework of, in phase 1, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve now? And what do you want to achieve in 1 year's time? What do you want to achieve in 5 years' time? So that sort of guides, and it's a very dynamic plan. It keeps changing. But you can't change the fundamental thing that you're doing. So Amazon can't one day say, oh yeah, we're not going to sell things. We're not. You can't change certain things. Certain things are fundamental to your business, right? But the plan on how you execute can be fluid. You can leave some room for that fluidity, which is what we've done. We used COVID as our plan to release, and I know you're going to come back to this later, but our plan to release a consumer healthcare product was maybe 2 years down the line. And we fast-tracked it in 6 months because of COVID. We had nothing else that we could do during this period of time. We were all under lockdown, and we decided, okay, you know what? Let's put our heads together, read through the science, go through the research, run the numbers, run the data, and then see if we can launch. And that's exactly what we did, right? And if I were to deep dive into that, right, that's a more interesting story, because the people who put the entire thing together are by no means ex-founders or people who have done 0 to 1 multiple times, multiple exits, all fresh grads. And I call them I call us fresh grads because even I was a fresh grad, though I might have a medical degree, never worked in a startup. I had shareholders to respond to, but I never had a boss to breathe fire down my neck or give me a certain task and tell me I need this done. It was all like, what, if I felt like doing it today, I'll do it. If I feel, surprisingly productive this week, I'll get a lot of things done. But, I had monthly goals, but I never had a daily task or a weekly task. And I see the value of all of that now. Like, having something to do every day helps. But in my case, during college, I think it was a bit more difficult to have a daily task when you have to go to the hospital, do your rounds, and then go back to class, sit down for a lecture. By the end of the day, you're dead. You just want to go back home and sleep. right? So it's very difficult, and that was something that I acknowledged, that it is difficult to run something. And I see why people dropped out of college to run their business, because it is very difficult to do both at the same time. Yeah.
And I think there was a period of time where you were also serving for the military, right?
Yeah. So that's a compulsory thing that everyone in Singapore does. So I was in the Navy. So you have a choice of between, not choice, they put you in either the Navy, the Air Force, or the Army. I didn't do any daredevil stunts. I barely sailed. I had a desk job, and it was an interesting job. It was a very people-oriented job. So I was in charge of, more HR function. Yeah. So it was a very interesting role. Yeah. But I didn't have to do your going through the jungles, and well, I did learn how to shoot. So I have that. Not shoot hoops, shoot a gun. Yeah. But it has to be an assault rifle. It can't be a pistol.
Amazing. But I think from there, right, from the whole consulting thing and the whole the startup thing that you were speaking about, how did you land in the poop? Like, and I think why?
Oh, okay. So
How was the story? Like, how was like the landing in the poop?
yeah, so we're getting to
Correct,
the.
and give us a context also so that viewers know what is the shit we're talking about.
I'll give you the raw dump of everything. Okay, so I first heard of something called a fecal microbiota transplant, maybe in my 4th year of medical school. So I was actually on the phone with an old friend of mine she was also studying medicine, and she had mentioned that I'm thinking of specializing in FMTs, and I was like, what is an FMT? And then I went and read up, and I realized, wow, people actually do this. They take poop from an unhealthy person, and then they take poop from a healthy person and put it into an unhealthy person, and that blew my mind away. But then I had other important things to focus on, and I didn't think about it again until I went to Scotland with my ex-girlfriend, my now ex-girlfriend. But and her mother was the one who was telling me about how someone in Aberdeen in Scotland was actually doing it in their backyard or something initially, where they would sort of have a stool bank and process it. They didn't have a lab, but it seemed to help patients. And he was explaining to gastroenterologists about the microbiome and how that changes a patient's life. And I was like, wow, that's very, very interesting. And I learned about the word microbiome, which is basically the collection of all the bacteria, viruses, fungi, all of that in your stomach. So I realized, wow, I knew we had bacteria in our stomach, but I didn't realize that it was a teeming ecosystem. So then I came back to Singapore after that, and then that's when I was introduced to, AMILI, which is short for Asian Microbiome Library. And then as I read up, I realized, wow, the bacteria are really doing a lot of different things that the human body can't do. And as someone who's obviously, as a medical doctor, I'm interested in medicine as a subject. And anything new is always exciting, right? So the more I read down, I went into a rabbit hole of, this is blowing my mind. Like, there's so much work going on. Yeah, this is some crazy shit, right? Like, I couldn't imagine that there was so much shit. And so I went and read up, and then I told my boss, I said, this is really exciting. Like, I never knew, I had not even thought about some of these things, like not even as a form of curiosity. And then going down the rabbit hole, I realized, wow, okay, this is really promising, because the microbiomes differ by geography. So the microbiome that Abhi has from the other Abhi and me is very different, governed by what we eat and where we live. So like if you live in a house with a garden and all of that, your microbiome might actually be different from someone who lives in a flat, right? And the urban dweller's microbiome is different from a farmer's microbiome. All of this is governed by mostly what we eat, but also by where we live. And I think a small chunk of it is genetics as well, right? Some of us are born in a normal delivery. Some of us are born via cesarean section, and at that level, at an infant level, there are differences in microbiomes. So like my own niece and nephew, they're fraternal twins. Their microbiomes are different. They eat the same thing. They were born the same way, but their microbiomes are different. which is very, very interesting to me, because what governs what goes in your gut. That's one. And I think the second part of what I'm really interested in is there are a lot of diseases that have some signatures of microbiome differences. So in children with autism, for example, they have a very diminished diversity. So diversity refers to what are all the different types of bacteria in your gut, and there's an index that we can come out with measuring some of this. So for children with autism, their diversity levels are actually very low, and some of them actually respond very well to certain probiotic supplements, and that means that their behavioral, repetitive behaviors and all of that reduce in intensity. And some of them also have gastrointestinal trouble. So like they are very picky with their food, or certain foods don't sit with them. So they're very picky because they know that if they eat certain things, it affects them inside. So they have that far-reaching, like I know that if I eat something, it's going to be bad for me, I'll still eat it anyway. But these kids are very, very particular because they know that if they eat, so for example, if they eat chicken, it's going to affect their gut, or if they eat broccoli, it's going to affect their gut. So they're very choosy and picky because they're very sensitive to the effect that the food has on their body. And all of this is governed by the bacteria because they are the ones that help in digestion. They are the ones that help in producing certain enzymes. They are the ones that govern whether you get enough vitamins, whether your body's absorbing enough minerals, all of that. So from a food perspective, it's very interesting. Then from a clinical therapy perspective, it's very interesting. And honestly, I think in Asia, we're far behind on the research. A lot of this research was done in America or the United Kingdom or Europe in general. And we are far behind in Asia. So just having a good set of data on Asian microbiome itself is lacking. So that's one of the reasons why we started collecting all of this, to begin to study the correlations between different diseases, different age groups, different races. So in Singapore we have Chinese people, we have Malay people, we have Indian people, we have Eurasians and mixed blood people, but mixed races. So how does all of this pan out? Is it fully on food, or is it also a little genetic? So I think those are the questions that we're trying to answer. Nobody's asking these questions even.
So talking about questions, Shreyas, I have one question. So is there a right food, right? We eat a lot of things, I mean, including the homemade food and stuff that we buy from supermarkets. Is there a right food that we have to eat? Right?
More like a diet, actually.
Yeah, or a right diet, yeah. So that we kind of have to keep our gut healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, what
Also,
is the gut feeling?
I'll go one step. Yeah.
I also have like one more added question. You spoke about that like my microbiome might be like totally different from a farmer's microbiome. So is there like a did you arrive at a certain lifestyle which says that, hey, you know what, like a guy living in this condition who eats this kind of food, maybe his microbiome is the best, and or I'm speaking like a very dumb guy right now, but
No. It's a very good question. It's very sensible. Short answer: we don't actually know what is a perfect microbiome, because I suspect it doesn't exist. And to answer Abhi's question, right? What is the right food? I think the question should be, what is the right food for you? So there is a certain level of individualization required, in the sense that because our microbiomes are different, what works for Abhinandan, for example, might not work for Abhinav, because their microbiomes are inherently different. So the question is, what food is right for you? So I'm sure you've experienced this in your life, where you eat a meal with everyone is fine, but your stomach feels a little off, right? There is some intolerance that your body has to something. It could be as simple as chapati, it could be as simple as rice. Some people hate eating rice because it just doesn't sit well with them. So they just avoid it. And sometimes it's not about the carbs, it's not about the weight gain or anything. It's just, I can't process it very well, and I know something is wrong. We're just not able to articulate it. And my theory is that the answer lies somewhere in your shit. So actually going through your shit in the lab, what we find is that certain people have very superior microbiomes that allow them to break down fat, break down carbohydrates, break down, proteins like that. And then some people, their protein metabolism is very bad. They're not able to put on muscle because of that. They're not able to lose weight because their carbohydrate breakdown is top notch. So every piece of carb that you eat gets metabolized perfectly and gets stored in your body as fat.
I was actually coming to that point, Shreyas. What is the importance? Because now, right, people want to lose weight. Probably we're just sitting and working, right? And a lot of people want to lose weight or put on muscle. And then what is the importance of microbiome in this whole process? Is it a short-term impact that the microbiome has? Or is it more of a long-term impact?
So that's a very good question. Is it short term or long term? What we see in our tests usually, right? I would like to call it a 3-month snapshot. If for example you've not gone from being a carnivore to a vegetarian, and your diet is very similar throughout the last 3 months, I think a 3-month snapshot is very good. It gives us a chance to look at what you've eaten in the last 3 months. It gives us a chance to understand how your overall health is doing based on your microbiome. Now, how it works is it's not direct. It is not all the time very direct relationships. Sometimes it is indirect. Sometimes it's associations. So, for example, in people who are obese, we see a higher abundance in a certain different type of bacteria. Does this bacteria cause someone to be obese? We don't know yet. But what we're seeing is that, okay, if that's very high, you're generally quite obese. Or if you have very low energy, we find that certain bacterial groups are completely depleted. And these are the groups responsible for production of short chain fatty acids from your food that give you the energy that you require every day. So my own experience with the microbiome is that, I mean, both of you know this, right? I've always been a little chubby, most of my life, right? Since high school as well. And last year when we were developing the test, and we had a dietitian on board as well. So I sat down with her one day and I said, you know what? Let me be the first guinea pig of this weight loss diet. Based on my microbiome, I knew that a lot of things were, all over the place. And because I was not eating right, I was eating out most days. And I was having very poor frequency, So like one day I'll just not eat breakfast. One day I'll not eat lunch and I'll go straight for dinner. And dinner will be some very heavy carbohydrate-filled, fat-filled, meal that is just fried, with butter and ghee, whatever. This is super unhealthy. Wash it down with a cup of Coke, just absolutely unhealthy. And I told myself, okay, this needs to change. And so I went on this microbiome diet, which was tailor-made for me based on my own results. And in 3 months, I lost 15 kilos. So I was 99 when I started, and 3 months later, I was 84. And now I've put on a little bit more weight because I'm not following the diet, but it does work. My energy levels were through the roof. The first 1-2 weeks was a bit of a struggle because you've radically changed how you consume food. But within 3 months, by the second month, I was working out every day. I was doing 20 minutes high intensity interval training. It was going very, very well. I stopped because I got a bit lazy, but I could see once you have that momentum, don't stop. Don't let any excuse come in the way, because I was riding high. My serotonin levels were very high. So serotonin is a very important neurotransmitter along with GABA, which what these two do is they form your stress relief, sleep cycle, and and anti-anxiety neurotransmitters. So my levels were actually quite low before that, and I could feel it instantly. And within a month's time of changing my diet, I could feel like I was very well rested. At 10:30, my head touches the pillow and I'm off to sleep. I'll wake up the next morning at 5 a.m. You know how difficult it was to wake us up at 5 a.m. in Perth? Right? It was insanely difficult. And I was here just waking up 5 a.m. on the dot, after sleeping at 10:30. So good sleep cycles, good, just in general, I felt really good, But of course, this diet is unsustainable for me because I like to eat a little fried food every now and then. So I have now tried to variegate it. So I think for food, right, there are two ways to look at it. The very academic way would be there are certain foods that are probiotic in nature. So like in Indian cuisine, for example, we have a lot of fermented food. Our dosa batter is fermented when we eat idlis.
Curd.
We eat a lot of yogurt, curd, right? Like I can't live without curd rice. Like every meal in my house, at least one meal has to be curd rice. Like it's like a staple. And then you have paneer, you have a lot of other things that are slightly fermented. Buttermilk. In general, buttermilk is actually, I don't know whether you guys have done this, but you make buttermilk in the morning and then you drink it in the evening. Let it ferment a bit. And it actually tastes much better, but it's also far more healthy for your life. And now you'll see in the market, you'll have like kombucha and all these other fermented drinks. There is a little bit of awareness on all of these probiotics. So probiotics forms one chunk. So that's like the fish in your fish tank. But when the fish die, you can't keep adding new fish. You have to feed the fish so that they live, right? So that's why I feel like supplements are very good for the start to jumpstart your microbiome. But you should be feeding yourself with prebiotics. So the foods that actually feed the bacteria. That's actually really important as well. And you can try and Google these things. I'm not going to give you a rundown on what everything is because it is different for different people. So I think learning about it there is no one size fits all, honestly. And there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be a one size fits all as well because we're all inherently different inside internally, right?
Yeah.
So you have to feed yourself in the right way. And that is what makes the difference.